I sold the last piece of my mother's silver to pay for my son's college textbooks, and he hasn't called me in 3 years. The last time I saw Trevor, he left his coffee cup on my porch railing and said, "I'll come back next weekend, Mom." But next weekend never came. The weeks turned into months, then into 3 full years, not even a Christmas card. I kept telling myself he was busy. He had a life, a wife, a job. But then the birthdays passed. Then my sister died, and he didn't even send a text. And somewhere in the silence, I realized I was the only one still holding the rope. The porch creaked like it always did in the mornings, just me and my black coffee and the wind through the pine. This was my ritual. Wake early, breathe deep, remember the sound of a child's voice that used to call me Mama, like it meant something. I don't expect calls anymore. But I still check my phone at 8:17, because that's the time he used to call when he first moved out. Hope dies slow, you know. I raised Trevor alone after his dad died in a logging accident. He was 9. I was 38 and still believed in good things. I worked double shifts at the diner, gave up my painting classes, sold off the family piano to open a small lunch counter. That little counter paid for his summer camps, his braces, his college visits. I didn't even flinch when he asked for out-of-state tuition, said he wanted to study something niche. He majored in ethnobotany, plants and toxins and folklore and such. I didn't understand it, but I supported it. That's what mothers do. They believe even when it doesn't make sense. Trevor was a particular child, quiet but sharp. He folded napkins with surgical precision at age 6. He hated when I changed brands of ketchup. Once, when I gave him walnut cookies by mistake, he spit them out and scrubbed his mouth till his gums bled. I thought he was just sensitive. Smart kids are like that, I told myself, but sometimes I'd catch him watching me, just watching, like he was taking notes. I didn't let it scare me. I just tried harder to be the mother he could come home to. When he married Mira, I tried to stay out of the way. She was calm, distant into herbal teas and silent retreats. She never called me Mom. That was fine. I didn't expect much. But even when I offered to help with their wedding or asked to visit, things changed. They moved further out. Then the visits stopped. Then the calls. And when my gallbladder surgery came, no one showed up. Not even a card. Still, I kept his childhood room clean. His old sketch of a moth still hung over the dresser. I kept the guest towels fresh, just in case. The last birthday we celebrated together, he gave me a small jade stone and said, "This was used in burial rituals." I laughed, but he didn't. He was always like that, deadpan, thoughtful, sometimes too thoughtful. That night, he left early. I haven't seen him since. Sometimes I wondered if I did something wrong. Maybe I was too present. Too proud, too poor. Maybe he was embarrassed. Maybe Mira didn't like me, but I never asked. Pride gets quieter with age, but it doesn't disappear. 3 months ago, a woman at the community center asked me if my son ever came to visit. I said yes. I lied, but that lie came easy. It's the kind of lie women like me tell each other, to keep the silence from echoing too loud. You know, some people think a revenge story has to come with drama and fire and lawsuits, but sometimes the best kind comes wrapped in ribbon and sugar, disguised as forgiveness. I didn't know it then, of course, but the story started with a knock at the door. The day of my 74th birthday, I woke up early, poured my coffee, and walked barefoot to the porch swing like I always do. The sky was washed in mist. I sat there, waiting for nothing, which is something you learn to do with age. Then came the knock. Just once. Not hurried, not loud, just one quiet knock. I froze. The mailman never knocks. Neither does the neighbor boy with the church flyers. I opened the door and saw it. A plain brown package, carefully taped, with a white ribbon tied once around the middle. The name on the label was unmistakable. Trevor Jasper. I hadn't seen his handwriting in years, but there it was, neat as a blueprint. Sharp corners, blue ink, always blue. He never used black. I brought the box inside, didn't open it right away, just set it on the kitchen table and stared at it like it might speak first. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just sat there with the sound of the refrigerator humming behind me, the coffee going cold. I thought of all the things I wanted it to be: a letter, an apology, a key to a new place in his life. But when I finally unwrapped the box, it was none of those. It was cookies, dozens of them, hand-iced, delicate, like something from a boutique bakery. Flowers, leaves, stars, spirals, every one different. Trevor had never baked a day in his life. Inside the lid, one card was taped. "Happy birthday, Mom. Let's reconnect." That was it. No sorry, no explanation, no warmth. Just those 4 words. I held the card in my hand like it might evaporate. And then I knew. This wasn't an invitation. This was a test or a trap. So I stood up, walked to the fridge, and placed 1 cookie in a small Tupperware container. The rest I wrapped back up carefully. Then I picked up the phone, because there was one person in town who still treated me like I mattered. Joyce Maddox, my son's mother-in-law, 80 years old with shaky knees and a sweet tooth. And in that moment, it felt easier to give them away than to wonder what they meant. So I got in the car and I drove. And I had no idea that handing over that box would be the beginning of something I never saw coming. I pulled into Joyce's driveway just as the wind picked up. Her front yard was lined with little glass wind chimes she'd collected from flea markets, and they started singing in that eerie, beautiful way they do when the sky is too quiet. I knocked, and she answered in her slippers, her face lighting up the way it always had since the day she helped me through my husband's funeral without saying a word. "Oh, Evelyn," she said, "you didn't have to." "I know," I cut in, holding out the box, "but I wanted to." She looked at the cookies like they were gold coins. I told her Trevor sent them, that it was my birthday. She nodded like she understood more than she let on and said, "Then it's only right you share something sweet with someone who's been bitter all week." We laughed. I didn't stay long. We both knew how to keep company short but meaningful. That's something women our age learn. How not to overstay our welcome in spaces we once belonged to. Driving home, the sun began dipping behind the pines. The cabin's wooden walls greeted me with their usual creaks. I poured myself another cup of coffee, cold from the pot, and sat at the table where the box had been just hours earlier, and I felt not regret, not guilt, something closer to relief. As I rinsed the mug, the phone rang. I didn't rush. I never do anymore. I dried my hands slowly, walked over, and saw the name flash on the screen. Trevor. 3 years of silence and now 2 gestures in a single day, a box of cookies, and a call. I let it ring once more before I answered. "Hi, Mom," he said like nothing had happened. His voice was smooth, practiced. Too smooth. "I got the package," I said. "Yeah." He chuckled softly. "I wasn't sure you would open it." "I did." "And?" he asked. "How were they, the cookies?" I paused. I could feel the corner of my mouth tighten. "I didn't eat them," I said. "I gave them to Joyce." The line went silent. I thought it had dropped. I pulled the phone away from my ear and checked the screen. Still connected. "You gave them to Joyce?" "Yes," I said slowly. "She's always had a sweet tooth." A pause. His breathing changed, tight, fast. "You did what?" he snapped. I blinked. My hand gripped the mug harder. "Trevor, what's wrong?" "They weren't for her," he hissed. "They were for you. Only you." And then it came. That thing under his voice. Not sadness, not hurt. Panic. My chest tightened. I didn't answer. He kept going. "You never understand. You never think. You always do what you want." I tried to say something. Anything, but he'd already hung up. The dial tone rang in my ear longer than I wanted it to. I stared at the receiver, still in my hand, and the silence around me felt louder than it had in years. "Only you," that's what he'd said. Not "happy birthday," not "I've missed you," just "only you." I got up slowly and walked to the fridge. The Tupperware container was still there. That one cookie untouched. I stared at it like it might explain itself. And here's the part I need to ask you if you're listening. What would you have done? Would you have thrown it out right then, or called the police, or, like me, stood there thinking about what only you really meant? Let me know in the comments if you've ever gotten a gift that didn't feel like a gift at all. Something tells me I'm not the only mother who stood in a kitchen and wondered if love had an expiration date. Later that evening, just before I turned in, the landline rang. Hardly anyone calls it anymore. I answered without thinking. It was Laya, my daughter-in-law. She didn't say hello, just, "It's Ruth, she's in the hospital." I sat down on instinct. What happened? She collapsed. Vomiting, dizzy, confused. They don't know what's wrong. My mouth went dry. Did she eat anything unusual? She mentioned cookies. Said you brought them. I closed my eyes. I did. From Trevor. Silence. Do you think they could have made her sick? Leia asked, her voice shaking. I don't know, I said. I didn't eat any myself. She exhaled hard. If you think of anything, please tell me. I will. We hung up. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my chair by the window, the breeze slipping through the frame, and I held the unopened cookie in my lap. I don't know how long I sat there, but when the sun started rising behind the trees, I still hadn't moved. That morning, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Janelle Maroro. She worked in a research lab just outside of town. She owed me a favor. I didn't say much, just that I needed something tested. Quietly. She agreed to meet me the next morning. That day, I did everything the same. Fed the birds, watered the garden, swept the porch. But everything felt different, like I'd stepped into a story someone else had written for me, but I wasn't going to let it end on their terms. I didn't sleep the night after the call from Leia. I sat by the window until dawn broke through the trees, that cold Oregon mist sliding across the glass like a breath. My hand stayed curled around that one cookie in its little plastic container, like it might confess if I held it long enough. But cookies don't talk, and suns don't explain. The next morning, I drove to the lab with the windows cracked just enough to let the cold air sting. I didn't play music. I didn't want to feel anything. I just wanted to know what I already feared. Janelle came out back to meet me. She looked older, thinner, but still sharp-eyed. This the kind of favor I'll regret? She asked, only half joking. Just tell me what's in it, I said, handing over the container and the small empty bottle I'd found in the trash. She raised an eyebrow but didn't press. We'd known each other long enough for that. I sat in my car outside the lab for almost an hour, engine running, not ready to go home. I kept thinking about Ruth, kind Ruth, who sent me casseroles when my husband passed, who sat beside me through chemotherapy when I had breast surgery. Trevor hadn't even visited me then, but Ruth did. Now she was lying in a hospital bed, poisoned by something I handed her, and that haunted me more than anything. Back at home, I couldn't eat, couldn't sit, couldn't breathe without wondering what Trevor had really meant when he said, "Only you." I started pacing the hallway, opening drawers, checking places I hadn't touched in years. His old notebooks, my photo albums. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe some note I missed, some clue to how we got here. That's when I remembered the sketchbook. Trevor had kept dozens, even as a child. Meticulous drawings of plants, fungi, even root systems. I found one wedged behind the bookcase. The pages were dated, annotated. Latin names, extraction methods, symbols I didn't recognize. I turned page after page until I found it. Aconitum columbianum. Monkshood. A chill moved down my back. Notes in the margins talked about dosage control, taste masking, and toxicity under heat. I slammed the book shut and walked out of the room. I didn't want to know more, but I already knew enough. The phone rang just after noon. It was Janelle. She didn't even say hello. "There's something in the cookie," she said. "Traces of gray anatoxin, very rare, usually found in toxic honey or rhododendron extract. Definitely not from any standard baking ingredient, and definitely not an accident." I closed my eyes. "You said someone ate one of them?" she asked gently. "Yes." "Do you want me to notify someone? I can do it anonymously." "No," I said. "Not yet." We hung up and I just stood there, phone in hand, staring at nothing. The thing about grief is, it doesn't always wait for death. Sometimes it starts when someone you raised, someone you loved with your whole being, starts looking at you like you're just in the way. I sat down at the kitchen table and laid everything out. The sketchbook, the test results Janelle emailed me, the little plastic bottle. I kept the cookie in its container. I didn't want to look at it too long. That evening, I went outside. The sun was lowering behind the trees, casting long shadows across the gravel driveway. My feet moved without direction. I just walked. And then, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Mrs. Jasper?" the voice asked. "Detective Fallon Reyes. Dr. Maroro referred you regarding a toxicology result." I wanted to lie. Say there was a mistake. Say I overreacted. Say it couldn't possibly be true. But instead, I said, "Yes, that's correct." He was calm, direct. "Would you be willing to meet and discuss the situation in more detail?" I nodded even though he couldn't see me. Yes, I would. We met at the station later that day. Nothing dramatic. A quiet room, a pot of stale coffee in the corner, and a young detective with a notepad and a voice that didn't rush. He asked how long Trevor and I had been estranged. When was the last time we spoke? What was in the package? Who else had access? How Ruth ended up with the cookies? I answered everything truthfully. No drama, just facts. Like I was filing a report about someone else's life. Then came the question I hadn't prepared for. "Do you believe your son intended to harm you?" I stared at my hands. I don't want to believe it. But the cookie tested positive for poison, and the bottle in my trash wasn't mine. "Any motive?" he asked. "Financial? Emotional tension?" "He's always resented me, I think," I said slowly. "He blames me for things I couldn't fix. Do you have any physical evidence tying him to the intent?" I hesitated. "Not yet." He leaned forward. "If we're going to protect others and you, we'll need something stronger." I nodded, but my throat felt tight. He stood and handed me his card. "If anything changes, call me directly." Back in the car, I didn't start the engine. Just sat there with my keys in my lap. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even heartbroken. I was empty. Like someone had reached into me and taken out the last piece of belief I had in family. I drove home slowly, stopping at every light like it might change something. That night, I took the recorder out of the drawer where I kept it since the early days, back when I used it to record Trevor's first piano recital. I changed the batteries, tested the mic, slipped it into my coat pocket. I didn't know what I was going to say, but I knew I was going to see him, not as his mother, as the woman he underestimated. The next morning was quiet, too quiet. The kind that presses against your ribs and doesn't let you breathe right. I had made up my mind sometime between midnight and sunrise. I wasn't going to sit around waiting to be erased. I wasn't going to hope for an apology wrapped in frosting. I dressed slowly. Like every movement had meaning. I slid the recorder into my coat pocket, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted proof. I'd lived too many years being told things didn't happen the way I remembered. This time, I wanted to be sure. When I pulled up to Trevor's house, the yard was quiet. No car in the drive. Mira must have been at work. Good. He opened the door with a tight smile, the kind that doesn't touch the eyes. "Mom," he said, stepping aside. "This is a surprise." "I heard about Ruth," I said. "Wanted to check in, see how she's doing." He nodded, motioning me inside. "She's still at St. Luke's. They think it's viral. Mira's with her now." I nodded like I believed him. The recorder in my pocket was already running. The house was spotless. Of course it was. Trevor had always liked things just so. Even as a boy, he lined up his crayons by length, not color. "The cookies," I said, keeping my tone light. "They were beautiful." He raised an eyebrow. "Were they?" I didn't try them, actually, but Joyce was thrilled. She especially liked the star-shaped one. And there it was, a flicker, barely a pause. But his eyes narrowed, and his voice dropped half a note. "Joyce picked the stars?" I didn't answer that directly, just nodded. He turned to rinse out a glass that didn't need rinsing. She always went for the pretty ones, he said. Didn't care much about what was underneath. My heart thudded behind my ribs, but I kept my face still. You never told me you started baking, I said. New hobby, he replied. Helps me unwind. Where'd you learn to use monk's hood? He froze, just for a second, but his spine straightened and his hand gripped the edge of the counter. I don't know what that is, he said too quickly. Janelle does, I said calmly. She tested the cookie. His jaw twitched. He set the glass down gently, deliberately. You went to Janelle? I had questions. She had answers. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then he smiled, a small, cold smile. You know, accusations like this, they don't end well, especially without proof. I think you already gave me enough, I said. You slipped up. We stood there staring at each other like strangers. You've always misunderstood me, he said. No, I said. I think I finally understand you completely. I reached for my purse, fingers steady. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might echo off the cabinets. As I turned to leave, my eyes landed on the edge of the counter. There, just barely visible under a folded towel, was another small bottle. Clear plastic. Same size, same shape. Trevor saw me notice. He stepped sideways, casually blocking my view. I should go, I said. I've taken enough of your time. He nodded. Give Ruth my best. I stepped into the cold, the air sharp against my skin, and walked briskly to my car. I didn't stop the recording until I was inside with the doors locked. Then I hit save and sent the audio straight to Detective Reyes before I could talk myself out of it. Back home, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just sat at the kitchen table and let the silence settle around me. He'd done it, he'd planned it, and he hadn't even denied it. Not really. That night, I went to St. Luke's. Ruth was still unconscious, pale against the hospital sheets. Leah sat beside her, eyes red, hands clenched in her lap. I told her everything, quietly, simply, without anger, just truth. She didn't ask questions. She didn't interrupt. She just held her mother's hand tighter. When I finished, she said, I should have known. No, I said. You loved him. That's not a crime. She started to cry. I let her. I stayed with her until she fell asleep in the chair. Then, I drove home under a sky heavy with stars that didn't feel like they belonged to anyone. I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch with the hallway light on, the phone beside me. Every creak in the house made me sit up and listen, but I wasn't afraid. Not really. I'd already survived worse. And now, at least, I knew what I was dealing with. I wasn't a mother waiting for her son anymore. I was a woman protecting what was left of her life, and that changed everything. Detective Reyes called just after sunrise. I was already awake, standing by the sink with my second cup of coffee going cold in my hand. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He didn't need to. The audio was enough, he said. Combined with the lab results and Ruth's condition, we secured a warrant. I didn't say anything. I just nodded into the silence. We're moving today. He'll be brought in quietly. Thank you, I said, and hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I just sat down and let the warmth of the mug soak into my fingers. And when I finally stood, I walked into the hallway and opened the closet with the fireproof box I hadn't touched in years. Inside was my husband's pocket knife, a birth certificate, and a folder with the title of my house, still in my name, despite Trevor's insistence years ago that we transfer ownership for tax reasons. That conversation came back to me now with new clarity. Back then, I'd thought he was trying to help. Now I wasn't so sure. I gathered every legal document with my name on it and made copies. I called a lawyer I hadn't spoken to since my sister's estate was settled and made an appointment. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want headlines. I just wanted boundaries. Real ones. Legal ones. I drove to the bank and updated my will. I removed Trevor's name completely. I gave half to the local women's shelter and half to a scholarship fund for women over 60 returning to school. After that, I went to the hardware store and bought a new lock for the front door. I changed it myself that afternoon. Took me 20 minutes. felt like 20 years lifted off my back. The house was still, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like mine again. That weekend, I went through Trevor's old boxes in the attic. I didn't burn them, I didn't smash them. I just packed them tighter and stacked them neatly, labeled, "Not mine anymore." Then I called the real estate agent. I didn't need a big house. I didn't need memories that clung like cobwebs. I found a small cabin near the lake, 1 bedroom, 1 bath, a porch with just enough space for a chair and a table. I moved in 2 weeks later. I didn't tell anyone, not even Leia. I left behind the house where I had loved, lost, and waited. And I started over, not loudly, not publicly, just quietly, like slipping into water that finally feels the right temperature. I painted again, nothing fancy, just wildflowers, stormy trees, things I used to sketch before Trevor was born. I hung one painting on the wall by the window where the light hit it just right in the morning. I started volunteering at the community pantry twice a week. I didn't tell them anything. They didn't ask. We just stocked shelves and packed bags and made each other laugh between scoops of lentils. One day, Ruth came to visit. She'd recovered well, still tired, still a bit unsteady, but her wit was intact. She sat in my kitchen and drank chamomile tea while I sliced apples. She looked at me and said, "He's been charged." "I know," I said. She didn't ask if I'd visit him. She didn't offer sympathy. She just said, "Thank you for doing what I couldn't." I nodded. That was enough. Leia sent me a letter a few days later, handwritten, careful. She said she found strange notes in Trevor's journals, botanical terms she had to look up, doses, warnings, notations about making peace with loss. She said he'd been different lately, distant, disconnected. "I should have seen it," she wrote. "No," I whispered as I read. "You saw the son you loved, same as me." I didn't reply, not because I didn't care, but because some things don't need words. They just need time. I kept the last cookie, the one I didn't eat. I placed it, sealed in its container, inside the fireproof box next to the birth certificate and title papers. Not as a weapon, not as a grudge, just as a reminder of what I survived, of who I became after. There's a difference between healing and forgetting. I won't forget, but I've stopped bleeding. The wind hits the lake differently up here, softer, less bitter. Sometimes in the late evening, I sit out on the porch and let it wash over me. No one knows where I am, and that's the way I like it. Not gone, just free. I never visited him in jail. I didn't answer the first letter or the second. He wrote like nothing had happened. "Sorry things got out of hand," he said in one. I wasn't myself. But the truth was, he was exactly himself. That was what made it all so heavy. The person I raised, who once called me mama and asked me to kiss his knees after every fall, had turned into someone I didn't recognize. And maybe, deep down, I'd seen the shape of that person forming years ago. But I'd painted over it with love, like primer on a cracked wall. One afternoon, a package arrived. No return address, just my name in familiar handwriting. Inside was a notebook, Trevor's, pages filled with sketches, formulas, plants, and a few sentences that stopped me cold. Some people are born to absorb pain, others to deliver it. I didn't read the rest. I didn't need to. I wrapped the notebook in a brown paper bag and put it in the fireproof box with the cookie, the birth certificate, and the revised will. That box didn't just hold documents now. It held the story I never planned to tell. Not because I wanted to forget, but because it was finished. Leia visited once, months later. We sat on the porch watching the lake. She didn't ask me to forgive him. She didn't make excuses. She just said, "You were right to protect yourself. I hope I would have done the same." We were quiet for a long time after that. Joyce came too, walking slower now, but still sharp in the eyes. She brought blueberry muffins and left them on my counter like she used to back when grief lived in both our kitchens. "You saved me," she said. "I just passed along a box," I replied. "No," she said. "You trusted your gut. That's harder than it sounds when it's your own blood." I didn't argue. One day, I cleared a space in the attic of the cabin, a small shelf. I placed the evidence box there, wrapped in cloth like a personal time capsule. Not for the police, not for the press, just for me. I wanted to remember, not him, me, what I survived, what I saw, what I never let erase me. I planted a small garden out back that spring. Tomatoes, basil, peonies. I don't know why the peonies took. They never used to grow for me in the old house. But here, they thrived. Every week, they bloomed brighter, stronger, like they had something to prove. One evening, I heard someone at the community center mention Trevor's name. Wasn't he that guy who... They began. I turned, met their eyes, and smiled softly. He was my son, I said, but we're not in each other's stories anymore. They nodded awkwardly, and that was that. No one pressed. No one needed to. I had become something people didn't quite know how to define. A woman who had been hurt but didn't break. A mother who had let go without setting fire. A survivor who didn't need to be saved. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything. I still get up early, still drink my black coffee on the porch, still hear the wind move through the trees and wonder what it wants from me. But now the porch swing doesn't creak with waiting. It just swings, and I swing with it. One morning, I opened the fireproof box and looked at that cookie one last time. The sugar had dulled, the edges had crumbled, but it was still there, sealed tight, untouched. I added one more thing to the box that day, a photo of myself standing in front of the lake cabin, smiling not for anyone else, just for me. Then I closed the lid and slid the box back into place, not to forget, but to remember what never got taken. If you're still here at the end of this story, thank you for listening. And if you've ever been made to feel like your years of love, sacrifice, or silence didn't matter, just know this: you're not alone. Some victories aren't loud. Some stories don't end with fireworks, but they end with peace. Have you ever walked away from someone who refused to see your worth? If this story reminded you of something, share it in the comments. You never know who needs to read your truth today.